Hello, I am Chandu Nair handling the course on marketing management. Now we are going to talk about a very interesting concept, one very popular concept in marketing, the concept of the product life cycle. At the end of this chapter, we will try to get a better sense of what exactly we mean by a product life cycle, the stages of a product life cycle, the marketing strategies that one can adopt at different stages of the product life cycle, and how to use the product life cycle in product management and decision making. Now, a very fascinating aspect is that product life cycle is pretty similar to biological life, and many studies have shown that there is a typical S shape with respect to biological life in general, and a lot of studies show that even for products, the pattern is pretty similar. Studies by people in the US in 1969 over several products and brands have shown that in at least 52% of the categories, most product categories and products within that category follow a similar shape. So it's pretty fascinating how biological life and product life seem to mirror in many ways each other. So as we can see, like with humans, very few products have lasted and lasted and lasted. Salt is one product which has been there for years and years and years. So maybe many food products might have lasted, but specific brands with respect to food may not have lasted. So like we can imagine with humans, many products also too have a life and life cycle of their own. Now this product life cycle framework is a conceptual framework for us to understand how companies should manage the product within this kind of a broad theoretical construct. It is not really, in practical life, it's not really very easy for us to really map out a product life cycle and to see which stage the product is in its life cycle. For example, if you take something like salt itself, it's been around for a very long time, but can we ever say that is in decline? Until people stop eating salt completely, we can never say that that product is in decline. And suppose one were to make changes like fortified salt or iodized salt, will that again change the life cycle? Well, it could. So as we can make out, there are things that we have to keep in mind as a theoretical construct and look at its applicability completely in terms of its practical life. So there are various stages in the product life cycle. There is the stage of the birth, which is introduction. There is a stage where it grows. There is a stage where it has certain level of maturity, and then there is the decline stage. The introduction stage is where it all begins, and the concept is perhaps sometimes new even. Sales, as you can expect, many times tend to be much lower. Like when cell phones first came into the Indian market, you would recollect maybe that it was almost 15-16 rupees a minute to speak on the cell phone. Today, of course, it's a few paise many years later. So companies too tend to be a lot more selective. They go slow and steady in some cases. There are of course exceptions, like for example the recent iPad of Apple, where they went out with millions and millions, but that's because of a complete different buzz around that product category. In the growth stage, sales grow much faster, distribution expands and prices are changed, and it becomes a lot more easily available to the mass market. Same with the maturity stage. There are a lot more competitors too, a lot more people are aware of the products. The kind of people using it are of all categories of customers, not just the early adopters and the innovators, but even other people. And in the decline stage, well, there's something else which has come and caught the fancy of people, or something else is substituting it. So the product falls into decline. Okay. Now this is how it kind of typically is mapping out with respect to a product life cycle. As you can see, the classic S shape, and you can see that sales and profits too over time tend to be going from a loss or a negative situation with respect to profits, growing, and then maybe sometimes completely again going back into the red. So this is typically how it happens across a period of time, and this is the timeline on one side and sales and profit on the other. Now for us as marketers, it's important to see the characteristics typically. So suppose it's the introduction stage, typically sales, as we saw earlier, tend to be low, profits are negligible, there could be losses even. Cash inflow is typically negative because you're spending far more than you get. There are very few competitors, even sometimes nil competitors, and the customers who come to you tend to be the more innovative type, the very early adopters, people who want to try out new things. In the growth stage, on the other hand, sales tend to grow really fast, as can be imagined, and profits tend to reach their peak at some point in time. Cash flows tend to be moderate, and the competitors will grow because they now see that there is some traction out there, and let's also get a piece of the action. And customers tend to be a little more mass market. In the maturity stage, the rate of growth would be much lower. So if you take cell phones in India or mobile usage in India, till the 2000s it was still pretty early days, but in the last 4-5 years you would have seen a huge growth. Now you are seeing some kind of slowdown in the growth rate. It's still growing, you are seeing some kind of slowdown. So are we at the maturity stage? That's a good discussion for you to have with some of your friends, and you might find profits starting to decline. Maybe like if you take the cell phone case, is average revenue per user showing a decline, is the number of users joining the fray coming down, so on and so forth. Cash inflow, of course, may be much better in this particular case, and there will be many competitors, much more than what you initially thought. Like if you take soaps or detergents, you will find dime a dozen competitors. Same way with biscuits and cookies, you will find so many competitors all over the place, and there is a huge mass market. In a decline stage, you will find everything going down, and maybe even the laggards finally might come and start using them. So as you can make out, typically this is how it works in a theoretical point. Now what you can do as an intelligent marketing professional is to take bunch of products that you yourself are using, bunch of brands you are using, try and see, for fun's sake, how it kind of fits into a product life cycle. Where do you think you can get some data from, and try and map it and have a debate with some of your friends. That will help you understand this concept a lot more.